credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Man podcast, a podcast centered around self-mastery. I'm your host, Zach Schenken. It has been too long since I've been able to sit down with you guys in a solo cast. Had the opportunity to have some pretty incredible guests over the past few episodes now. What has amounted to, I guess, weeks of time. And it's been really incredible. So grateful for all of them. For any of those previous guests that are listening, shout out to you guys. I can't wait to do part twos with many of you. But I did want to get on today. Today's April 16th, and this is 2 days before my birthday when I'll be turning 24. And something I put on my story a couple years ago, definitely well before I was putting out content in this type of format, I decided to adopt a practice for myself that was inspired by I'm not sure who produces them, maybe it's Vogue, but there's like a YouTube series where they interviewed Billie Eilish starting at, I think, her 18th birthday, and then every year it's the same questions. They ask her the exact same questions from the year previous, and then you answer it based on your new learnings and evolvings as a human. And I thought it was such a cool concept, and it's pretty cool to be able to not only, write down these answers, but actually film and record yourself answering them so you can look back at the 22-year-old version of yourself, the 21-year-old version of yourself. So the first one that I did, I think I was 22, and when I was looking back at the previous, it turns out when I was looking back for last year's, it appears that I missed it. So that's kind of an unfortunate lapse in time that I'm not going to be able to get back, which is a little bit unfortunate. I think it was because of what was going on around my birthday last year. I was full-time recruiting for a job, getting ready to finish my senior design project and graduate university. I was also preparing for national playoffs in lacrosse. All of these obviously excuses, not good enough to just sit down and answer the questions, but regardless, that is the story as I'll stick to it. But either way, this is something that I encourage you to do and adopt as a practice for yourself. You don't need the medium of a podcast, and I don't think I'm always we'll see how it evolves. We'll see how I feel next year. I feel comfortable enough to answer these in this format with you guys this year. Some of these are more personal questions, but for you and your practice, like legitimately the first time I did it, I just threw my AirPods in and put my phone down stood it up in front of myself at a table and just filmed myself answering these questions. And I had the questions up on like a Word doc on my computer. And as you'll see, the questions, they kind of go from, the idea is to encapsulate and freeze in time where your head is at. Even some of the questions are very external, like some of the questions we'll get into, like, what is the best book you read? What does your style look like right now? How did you actually spend your birthday this year? Things like this, to kind of freeze that moment in time. But it's also things like, what is your opinion on relationships? Biggest mistake you made last year. And I don't want to spoil all the questions, but the original list, it's 23 questions. I think the first time I did it was when I was 22, and I didn't want to just do the thing where you keep adding a question because I think that's kind of annoying. So 23 was like a good number. I think the questions that they do for Billie Eilish is like 20. I think around that number is a solid list, and you can adjust the list as you want, and I'll have the list in the show notes of this podcast if you want to adopt this practice or something similar for yourself. I really do encourage it because it's pretty amazing to be able to go back and look at where you were, what you were thinking, and even what you looked like at the moment. Even just 1 or 2 years removed, it's already so incredible. And to be able to think that I'll have these moments frozen in time when I'm 35, 45, 55, be able to share them with my kids and not just say like, back when I was a kid, but I can actually show them like who I was, what I sounded like, and where my head was at with a lot of things. So I think it's a really cool practice, and I encourage you to adopt something similar. Again, I'm recording this before my birthday this year because for my birthday this year, as in many years previous for the last many, I haven't really known what to ask for. my parents were like, what do you want for your birthday? And I think at a certain point, once you start making your own money, you kind of have everything that you want materialistically, and you have less and less wants. So I haven't really known how to answer that question for a while, but this year on my list of goals I wanted to do for 2023 was a 5-day silent retreat and fast. And so I'm actually going to be doing that this upcoming week. So I have a video up on my Twitter talking more about that, which I will also link in the description, or you can just go to my Twitter at ZDSCHENKEN. Shoot me a follow if you haven't. That'll be the call to action. But on that video, I explain kind of what I'm looking to get out of it, why I'm doing it, and also just letting people know that I'm going to be kind of ghost protocol for a little bit. I'll do a full breakdown podcast and write a thread about my experiences with that. So that'll be taking place during the dates of my birthday and following. That's why I'm recording this preceding my birthday, but at or around at the same time. So I think that's all of the introduction and explanation necessary. So I think I'll just get right into these questions and share them along with you. I haven't pre-thought of the answers ahead of time. I encourage you to kind of allow yourself to arrive at the questions while recording. Like, don't prep answers, don't write them out, so that it is a flow of consciousness. Again, you most likely won't be putting this on a YouTube channel or a podcast, whatever. It's just for you. So don't worry about stuttering, taking long pauses, feeling awkward. Like, the video is just like a private log for you to go back to. Let it be as organic as possible, because I think in those moments you find answers that are more true on an emotional level, rather than the rational mind coming in and kind of polishing some sort of very official answer to give to somebody if you were to try to give an answer to someone face to face or in an interview or something of the sort. So the first question is, what is your name? My name is Zach Shankin. What is the first thing you did when you woke up this morning? This morning, I woke up and, like pretty much every other morning, I immediately get some water to drink and go to the bathroom. And then on Sundays, I do, in addition to my normal like morning gratitudes that I write out, I do a week in review. Still doing that practice. I've been doing that for a few years now, where I kind of summarize how I felt the week previous, kind of review the things that I did, less of like an X's and O's and more of just like, how was my temperament? Were there any larger events that happened? How did I feel about them? So I was writing that out this morning. So that's what I did this morning. What is a positive thing in the news right now? Ironically, a harder and harder question to answer every year. To be quite honest, and I haven't gone back and listened to the first one of these that I recorded, but I no longer really consistently digest any of the news, because I think it's all entirely propaganda meant to control our minds. So I choose to not let my mind be controlled by it and don't consume really any of it. I guess I would have recorded the last one of these much closer or more recently to COVID, and Biden just officially signed some piece of paper that said COVID's over, so I guess that's good news. Number 4 is, how did you spend your birthday? Like I said before, I will be spending my birthday alone in silence with no music, sound, food, whatever, fasting. Kind of a bit of a spiritual journey. So really excited. It's the first thing of that nature that I've ever done. But I've felt kind of called to do it. And this is the stars aligning to happen at a very special time for me for my birthday. So that's how I will be spending my birthday in 2 days, as it is April 16th. Favorite artist right now? I still think of all time, it's going to be artists like a Kanye, kind of just a perennial inspiration creatively, but recently have been bumping a lot of Don Toliver. So that is maybe a newer answer that'll fit this year's answer. Favorite purchase you made this year? I don't know that I bought a ton of physical things. I bought a new phone for myself, so that's a big one. I use it a lot every single day, both for my business and personal. So that was a big one. I took a couple good trips, but the list has a question about trips, so I'll try to keep it to material purchases. I don't think it was this year. I think it was 2 years ago that I got the inside of my arm tattooed. So I'm not going to count that, but I did get a tattoo on my leg, and I really like tattoos, so I'll go with that as my favorite purchase. It's kind of my favorite way to ignorantly spend money at the moment, so I'll go with that. Favorite trip you took this last year? Winding back the clock, so April of last year, immediately after graduating, took a trip to Texas for national playoffs. That was really, really fun to be there with my friends and team to make it to the championship game, and all of that was an amazing experience. So that was really fun. Over the summer, kind of just head down, grind mode. Recently took a trip to Florida, but I think my favorite trip this year would have been a trip I took to see a friend up in Boston. It's a really fun weekend, cool city. So very, very fun weekend. I did not regret that trip at all. It was super fun. Best book I read this year. Great question. This year's been a lot of rereadings. So I know I did a podcast on how to win friends and influence people. It's one of the most important books I think people can read. Go back and listen to that podcast if you want kind of like a summary and also an incentive to read it. That's up there. I'm currently rereading again. It will have been 2 reads this year for the 4 Agreements. Just a fundamentally life-changing book. Just reread Way of the Superior Man by David Data, another excellent book. If I had to land on one specific for this year, I think we'll go with the 4 Agreements for this year. Favorite new habit, routine, or experience? So for sure, new habit, routine it's going to be kind of twofold, but kind of a bit of a personal renaissance in like the way I'm treating my body. I've always trained really hard, so that's staying pretty consistent, but gotten a lot more into like natural, holistic nutrition with like kind of an animal-based diet, and then also spending as much time in sunlight as possible. And it has just drastically changed my health, like the quality of my skin, the quality of my sleep, like libido, energy levels, all of it has just been completely flipped from a lot of the previous kind of bodybuilder style, chicken, rice, low carb, low fat style diets I had done in the past. It's just night and day difference with how I feel and even how I look. So sunlight exposure and then kind of animal-based eating, cleaning up the diet in a quality of food way. I think I had a decent grasp on macronutrients and calorie control before, but actually increasing like the quality of the ingredients that I'm consuming, looking at where things are sourced, has made a massive, massive impact. So for habit and routine, like spending more time in direct sunlight on my skin, and then being much better about the sourcing of my food. What is the biggest thing happening in your career right now? Well, I guess had I answered this last April, it would have been getting a full-time job offer. But this year, it all within the span of that same year, I guess, has been getting that job and then quitting it and chasing the dream and living the dream full-time with what I'm working on now. So unequivocally, the ability to step away and do what I want full-time and work for myself will be probably an inflection point that I can look back on the rest of my life and say is one of the most exciting things that I was able to do. But certainly for this year and for the age of 23 was an amazing dream come true. So no doubt it was the ability to, put my head down, work constantly for about 10 months straight while having a full-time job, and trusting myself and making the leap. I did a podcast about that decision specifically called Burning the Boats. You can go back and listen to that if you're curious about more of the details of that process. But absolutely, that was the biggest thing for me. What is a fear that you have right now? Interesting question. I really feel like I have a lot better of a ability, and it's something that I've been continually curating, but the ability to reframe things. So I would honestly say that I don't have things that I fear, but I think deep down, there's always things that you're afraid of. So I'm going to have to sit here for a second and analyze. I think one overarching fear is like the fear, or maybe it's a worry that I'm not always doing either the right thing or the most that I could be doing at any one time. And part of that's unlearning old mental habits, like kind of an obsession with being stressed and always hyper productive and working. And I think a lot of that is it's a choice rather than a necessity to be successful. So getting over some of that. And then definitely a fear would be missing out on relationships or the ability to deepen relationships with my family in the pursuit of my dreams, or even just trying to live a fully actualized adult life. It's weird how atomized and separate things can get when you're trying to kind of do your own thing, establish yourself as an adult, and build a life for yourself that is totally aligned and congruent with yourself. And when those things don't perfectly align, and a big external thing would be like places to live. Like if some of your family members, like younger siblings, whatever, for me, want to live, like stay in the state that I'm in, but I want to go see the world. Like, how do you continue to nurture relationships when it seems like life is pulling you apart? So a fear would be not being able to have deep, meaningful relationships, or at least continue to grow those relationships with my family. But I think just having that level of consciousness will serve me and us in that curation over time. And it's not something I really worry about, like a true fear. But had I had to answer the question, that's what I would give. 12 is, do you feel like you are more or less creative than last year? Well, that is unequivocally more, in the biggest ways possible. I think I've kind of fully unleashed something that's been inside of me for a long time, especially getting into like the writing side of what I do, whether that be writing the posts I put on Instagram, tweeting, or doing some of the kind of longer form world building, narrative building around the business I'm building. Just getting to be creative on a daily basis, like blocking out time to be creative every single morning. It's night and day. I mean, last year I was in so many mental boxes by comparison in a lot of ways, but even like in a very literal way, I was still in university, still putting things in my brain to regurgitate them onto tests or for projects. And now I completely work for myself. My mind is a lot more in an unlimited state, and I love that ability to flow and be creative. And I think it's only going to continue to grow as long as I maintain that intention. So massively, massively more creative than last year. Are you more confident this year compared to last? I would say so. I think I've always had a decent sense of confidence, but I think putting myself out there has kind of like hardened the steel, if you will. You know, like I thrust myself into a bit of a fire by fully exposing myself to the world, putting stuff out online, like even putting stuff up on pre-existing social media accounts where everyone from your almost former life, if you will, are there to observe it and criticize it and be like, what do you mean? What are you doing? It doesn't make sense. And it's not to cast judgment on them. I get it. It's weird. It's hard to even characterize. But the ability to continue to show up week after week, day after day, and continue to put that content out there, I think it has reinforced that internal sense of confidence. And then also just evolving my fitness, my aesthetic, my style. Like, I feel like I'm just really coming into myself a lot, and that's going to be a thing that continues to happen year after year. So for sure, feel more confident. I think it's a lot more external facing, but I also do think that there is kind of a emboldening of that internal sense of confidence as well. Biggest accomplishment from this past year. I graduated university, which to many people is kind of a big milestone, but I even look back on it as kind of like a joke accomplishment. Like I know that I worked hard at times. Like I look back freshman, sophomore year, I was kind of studying pretty hard. I went to a very, very rigorous university, but I don't really think it took all of me to get through and get out. And part of that was I took a year through I went to university during the COVID situation. So it shook things up, made things easier to cheat or collaborate. So I honestly don't look at that as something that other people might look at as a big accomplishment, but I think for sure setting out on my own, getting a full-time job. But way more important than that was like setting a clear intention for what I wanted, working extremely hard and clearly on it consistently, and then achieving the ability to step into working for myself full time. Like I said before when I answered that other question, where I am now is exactly where I imagine myself to be. And it's unbelievable to be able to say that. And it brings me a tremendous sense of pride and fulfillment. And then to be able to continue to live that dream day in and day out, it's very, very meaningful to me. So for sure, my biggest accomplishment from my past year would be that. Favorite new person you met this year? I think when I answered this 2 years ago, it would have been a girl that I separating from when we broke up and went our separate ways. But it's funny how that stuff changes so quickly over time. I'll definitely have to go back after this podcast and listen back to my previous answers and look into the eyes of a younger version of me. But this year, and it's going to sound really corny and whatever, this is for me. I'm just happen to share it with you guys, but definitely think that meeting myself in a way that I haven't any year previous, I hope that is something that I can kind of continue to say year after year to learn more and more about myself. I do hope that answer is external some years. Eventually there will come the time where I meet a person that I intend to partner with and build a family with. So she will be that answer one year. I'll be able to smile and say when I have my first kid, my second kid, those will of course be those answers into the future. But meeting myself this year in ways that I hadn't even scratched the surface through this process, it's been extremely isolating. A ton of time spent with myself. And I've wrote a post recently about solitude and how it's so important and the difference between loneliness and solitude. And there were times for sure that were lonely, but I'd say a majority of the time wasn't. I've always been someone who's been comfortable spending time with himself, but I've really fallen in love with the time that I get to spend with myself. And because of all that isolation and solitude, I've really been able to ask a lot of questions, spend time with my thoughts, reflect with them in writing, and ask what I want out of myself in life. And what do I believe about the world and religion and the fabric of reality? A lot of those bigger questions. And this podcast has been such an incredible medium to explore that with myself, as well as teach myself through asking questions of really, really interesting people. It's why I don't intend to stop this anytime soon, like even if it is just a selfish pursuit. So the favorite new person I met this year is myself, or what I can say is this new version of myself. Super corny answer, but I hope that the context that I brought to it makes it seem a little bit less so. And I think it's really hard to characterize for someone who hasn't gotten to that place. But I do think that sort of rebirth, I call it like a renaissance of self within the branding and context of what I'm building with the Vitruvian. But I think when everybody has the capacity to, and hopefully will experience at least once in life, a true sense of rebirth for themselves, kind of a high elevated level of consciousness, awareness about themselves, about the world. So that experience for myself has been incredible and continues to evolve. And I'm so grateful for that. Who is someone that you miss? Good question. It's a hard one to answer, I think. I think it's easy to say like the women that have come in as romantic interests in and out of my life, but I think there are parts of me that miss the simplicity of my life before. And I know that's not like a who answer, but when I look back on where I was, who I was surrounded with when I was still kind of in school and living that life and what does feel entirely like a former life, there are aspects of it that I miss. I would not go back. You could not pay me to go back. But there were aspects of it that were just really simple. You knew exactly what you were going to do the next day. Everything was kind of on tracks. I was established in the communities and social environments that I was in. I had a routine that was very clear. Not to say that I don't have some of those things now and I'm continuing to build them out. And again, you literally could not pay me to go back. I'm so unbelievably happy to be where I am. But I think there are aspects of that former time that I do miss. So that's how I will answer that question in a very non-direct way, which may be annoying to someone. But again, these are my private thoughts that I'm choosing to share, not the other way around. 17, if you could go back 1 year, what would you do differently? Wow. Interesting question. I mean, 100% I would start putting content out earlier. I didn't have any sort of direction or mindset around any of this. All of this has come as kind of the second I come to realize I need to do it, I've tried to take fast action on it. So there hasn't been a ton of like lollygagging when it's like, okay, I need to make a podcast. Boom, I start making the podcast. Okay, I need to make short form content. Boom, we start making clips. So I haven't like really dragged my feet at any stage of the journey, but obviously could I have started months earlier than I did? That would be awesome because it's just more time for growth and audience building. So that's one kind of answer, but I don't think it's fair because I wouldn't have had the context or the vision for even what to put out there, or the message or any of it. So maybe starting sooner, of course, with putting myself out there, recording and making content. As far as things that were within my control that I feel like I made mistakes, I think I like the way I did it. There are arguments to be made that I could have left my job sooner and or stayed longer. Because like if you stay longer, you have more savings. You leave earlier, you can take action faster. But I really do feel like I hit the sweet spot. And when it felt like the right time, I listened to that feeling and I made the decision. So I really don't think, and obviously this is one of those questions, if you could go back and do it differently, like, well, I wouldn't change anything because it got me to where I am now. So this is barring butterfly effect. Like you can change something and only improve. I'm trying to think of like major things over the last year that would have improved my experience, but I really don't think there is a ton. Of course, there are certain things that I may have said or done with individual people, maybe differently, but I don't really lament any of those. I really don't think that I have in any major way wronged anyone or said anything that I regret. I think I'm a pretty intentional person with the words that I use and the way that I spend time with people. So I don't think I would do much of anything differently, specifically this past year. Number 18, are you in a relationship right now? Nothing official, so no. Not in a relationship right now. And like I said about getting to know myself, I'm really prioritizing that true self-growth, which I think when most people say things like that, it's a cope. Like, I'm just loving me right now. I'm single and happy. But really, like, even in the intonation of their voice, you can tell that they're desperately want to be not single. But I feel like, especially as a man, I am blessed to have time on my side. You know, I'm only 23 going on 24. There is so much time for me, and there's no fixed timeline that I need to be looking for a partner. Like, I could find my wife tomorrow at 24, or I could find her in a decade at 34. And I know that there's just so much self-growth, and the more that I am learning about healing child wounds and parent wounds and the trauma that we carry into the relationships that we have, and then the equal trauma that is shared by the partners that we've attracted because of who we are, I really am prioritizing trying to do as much work as I can before I meet somebody like that, so that, one, I attract someone who is as healed as they possibly could be to an equivalent level that I am, and then they're also at a conscious level trying to do the work together to grow and heal together. So in like a non-corny way, I'm really happily single right now, and I have not set any particular intention to bring someone into my life right now. But of course, I leave room for God, the divine, the universe to give me someone to teach me lessons along the way, whether that be for a really beautiful short-term relationship or something that could develop into a lifelong partnership. What is one thing you could be doing better right now? Good question. I think health is in a really great spot. I think sleep is in a really great spot. I intend to start filtering my water better. I've learned a lot about water quality this year, so that's soon to purchase a pretty significant water filtration system. Could be doing that now. I'm back being consistent with reading. Took a bit of a hiatus when I was really in output mode, but I'm back reading, so I feel good about that. But I think what is one thing I could be doing better? I think being more regimented about creative work, pairing my ability to be extremely disciplined with the creative artistic pursuits that I have, and meeting somewhere in the middle where I am not just writing when I feel like it, but forcing myself to do it maybe sometimes when I don't totally feel like it, but also not over regimenting it and taking away the love and excitement for those moments, and allowing space for kind of divine spark and things to come to you more organically. So I think just maybe getting slightly more consistent with the output of content, and even just being braver than I am now. You know, pretty much everyone that I reach out to on social media, like, hey, would you come on my podcast? It's almost always yes. So I have these ideas for people I want to bring on, but for whatever reason, I'm waiting. So I think I could be even more bold than I have been, and just continue to ask even more greatly of others and the world, and just have it returned back on to me. So just getting even more aggressive with stuff like that. And I do plan on it. Okay, now these will be some heavy ones. What is a piece of advice that 50-year-old you would give to current you right now? Well, I always try my best. You know, it goes into the memento mori thing, which I talk about all the time. But I think all the time I try to frame my perspective on and decision making a ton on, would that old version of myself on my deathbed, or even just into retirement age and older, be happy with the decisions I'm making, and look back on the decisions made that they can't change and be okay and at peace with them. So I try to live very intentionally that way, and I've been playing around a lot. I've talked on this podcast about the idea of giving yourself permission to live the dream now. Don't wait for some arbitrary other person, a company, a number in a bank account, a retirement age, some specific event, whatever it may be, a place to live, a car you own, whatever it is, to give you permission to be living the dream that you have for yourself now. Like, define clearly what it would feel like and look like exactly to live that perfect life, and then do as many of those things and elicit as much of that feeling as you can immediately, and then try on your way to chasing those large goals to feel great doing it along the whole way. So I think because I'm so conscious of that, there isn't a ton that I would change in my pursuit. But 50-year-old me, there's a ton of years after that 50-year-old self. That's really only ideally just past middle age. If I'm lucky enough to live towards 100, which I would love to and intend to try to go the distance there. But what would that person, who likely is at that point a father, give to me right now? Probably just stay the path, enjoy the ride, and don't worry too much about who she will be or when you'll meet her. Just continue to focus on becoming the man that you know you need to be. 21. Who is your best friend? Good question. I think that my answer from 2 years ago definitely has changed, and not because of proximity, just because of how much clearer, and yeah, I'd say clearer, my values have become to me, and how malaligned they are with that person. There's been no fallout, and there's been no poor events associated with that relationship at all. But I don't see them being a friend for life anymore, only because we want such different things out of life. Again, no one is better than the other, but I am very clear on what I want, and it is clear to me that that person no longer feels, well, one, may or may not know exactly what they want, but two, currently, as they display with their behavior, those aren't aligned. So I've met amazing, amazing people across this year. And honestly, now that I think back to the question of like, who is the favorite new person you met this year? I mean, I could list so many people that I'm excited to see what the future looks like. I mean, I'll give a few shout outs right now, like Ryan Ayala, Kyle DiMatteo, Axel Mora. I hope I don't leave any. I mean, I'm going to leave people out, but I've met some really incredible people and continue to meet amazing people. I've got some cool podcast guests coming down the line. If you follow me on Twitter, you would have saw that me and Winston are going to do an episode when I get back from my retreat. I mean, just like really amazing people doing amazing things. Jonas Kilker. I mean, just like pretty much anyone I've had on my podcast, there's just so many cool people. So I'm really like through the moon about what this next phase of life is going to be. But who is your best friend? I think outside of myself, I'm going to go with my brothers. And I'm happy to say that. And I've been much more intentional this year about intentionally, consistently reaching out to them, doing weekly texts or calls. Hey, how are you doing? Just checking in, because when I was in college, I allowed the excuse of I'm busy, they're busy. And just, even though we were blood related siblings, I would only hear from them a couple times a semester. And that's just wrong. Like, were I to die, I would regret doing that. So I made the decision to be more intentional about it. And I've loved, intentionally setting like dinner dates with my brothers, bringing them to the apartment to cook, and just having those long conversations, like blocking out time on the calendar. They're busy, I'm busy. There's no disrespect to their time or my own, but really being intentional about carving that time out. So I don't think either of them listen to this podcast. I put out too much content for them to sit through, which is, I'm happy to say that that's true. But in the event that they find their way to this audio bite, Nicholas and Michael, I love you more than you will ever know. And I know that I will be there for you until I physically can't anymore. And I believe the same is true for you guys. And it's amazing to watch you guys grow. Nicholas now engaged, which is crazy as the older brother to say. Excited about your journey with your fiance, and Michael. So much growth as a man this year, and it's amazing to see you grow up. So I love you both. What is a mistake you made this last year? I don't know. I think, again, with the reframing thing, and there's very few things I look at it in general as mistakes. Honestly, like, they would just be boring business stuff. Like there were certain things I spent money on that I didn't need, whether it was a service or like a subscription or a piece of software. Like I found a free version later, or found somebody who could provide the service for cheaper. So really annoying, like small stuff like that. Like I could have saved a couple grand here and there on some of the business venture stuff. So small mistakes like that. But I think large scale, I don't look at this past year with many, many mistakes. Like, I loved investing the time I did with the people I did, kissing the girls that I did, investing emotionally into the women that I did, like meeting and losing those people. Like, I don't regret a single thing. I learned so much. I know that I acted in accordance with my values and did not intentionally put any negative energy out into the world that I can directly point out right now. So I really don't think I made many, if any, mistakes. I'm unconscious of intentional error. I'm sure I made many errors. 23. Where will you be 1 year from now? The last and final question. So 1 year from today, April 2024, getting ready to turn 25 years old, I will have made my first $1 million, and I will be traveling intermittently to really cool coastal locations. I want to spend as much time in the sun for the rest of my life as possible. So I think it would be awesome. I don't know if at this specific time next year I will be domestic or abroad. I'd estimate domestic. I'm going to say beach posted in Florida somewhere at a sick property with hopefully some amazing friends, maybe an amazing lady friend. If not, that's all right. Again, I have so much time on that kind of front, and I don't want to put a timeline on that, but I certainly will have crossed the $1 million mark by then, and I will be in even better shape than I am now, and hopefully just as happy and present as I am now, if not more. I just have so much to be grateful for, and to anyone that's made it this far in the podcast, you are innately so central to that journey. Now that this is not only going to be a private recording for me, but I'm going to choose to share it with other people. Thank you so much for being a part of it. And it's so cool. Again, we're at this front end of this journey. I think we're still before the quote unquote hockey stick growth when this becomes a thing. And there's a little bit of ubiquity to it, and people at scale have heard of and listened to these types of things. But for those that are part of this early beginning of this kind of Renaissance movement and what I'm trying to build here, every one of you has made the world of difference. To those that have been since the very beginning, I mean, shout out to you guys, the ones that swiped up on the first stories that I posted and said, keep going, this is sick. Those little bits of confirmation and encouragement meant the world when it was the hardest right at the beginning. And then for the low points, the troughs and the bottoms of the waves when I was riding it, everything came at the right time, whether it was a quick message, a text, even some of the guests I've had on this podcast being hey man, you're doing really cool work, just keep going. Those words of encouragement are amazing reflections of what I believe to be the positive message that I'm putting out in the world. So every one of you has been part of it and will continue to be, so if you so choose. So I'm grateful for whatever amount of participation you've been able to contribute to this and what I'm building here. You are intimately connected to it. So thank you. And don't think that just one listen or one doesn't matter, because it does. It matters a lot to me, especially in the early stages when the numbers are less inflated. But I even know down the road, I will be so, so grateful for every single person. I mean, it still blows my mind that people spend, 50 minutes to an hour and a half to 2 hours to 3 hours, whatever it is, listening to me talk, and finds what I have to say meaningful, thoughtful, encouraging, entertaining, whatever it may be for you. But it's amazing to me, and it fills my cup, and I really do feel aligned with what I'm supposed to be doing with my life, which is something I'm so proud to be able to say and excited to continue to do the work, and I feel called to. So that is my list of answers for the birthday question list. I don't have a better name for it. Maybe a birth year in reflection kind of list. I encourage you to use the same list, edit out questions you think are lame, add in questions you think might be more meaningful. I encourage you to leave a bit of a balance, and you can kind of see the flow of the questions. The way I wrote them out is it's very external to this internal. It's working you towards a place where you're more vulnerable. You'll notice when you're speaking too that it's going to be awkward. You're going to set your phone up. Many of you will have never recorded a video of yourself. That's fine, but it'll be weird at the beginning. So it's easy to it helps to be able to warm up with kind of some of those simpler questions before you start asking yourself deep questions about your thoughts, feelings, and reflections on the world. So that would be my encouragement if you do choose to make edits, but definitely try to add this into your practice for your birthday. Maybe this is something you do end of year. I know I talked about how I do my year in review practice, but this is another similar thing where you are reviewing the last year. It's just your birth year versus the calendar year. But yeah, very excited to be going on to 24, the Kobe year. Last year was MJ. Big year behind me and an even bigger year ahead. Go to my Twitter. Again, follow me on Twitter. I'm on there all the time. I think it's my strongest platform by far. It has the video talking about what I'm going to be up to this specific week. And you can also keep an eye out on there for kind of my writings and thread on my experience with this upcoming 5-day silent retreat and fast. I will also do a podcast explaining it at length, so you can stay tuned for that episode to come. Winston's in the pipeline. I have some other amazing guests queued up and mentally queued up as well to reach out to. So really big things coming. I'm excited to continue to blast out more and more of this stuff. And if there's anything specific or any one specific you want to see, please message me on any of my platforms. You can DM me on Twitter at ZDSCHENKN, Instagram, that same handle for my personal. And then the content for this podcast is at Vitruvian Gentleman. That's where I do longer form written posts, some of my more artful pursuits. And stay tuned. There's going to be some really, really cool stuff coming out over the next 6 months or so. So keep an eye out on that Instagram account. It'll be kind of the main place that things are coming out. But excited and blessed to do what I do. If you find it meaningful, share it with somebody who you think might also find it meaningful. And follow me on all of the socials I just listed. And remember that your time and attention are your most valuable resources. So thank you for spending a little of them with me today. Memento Mori, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Vitruvian Man podcast.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.